telling me that you have a
not think were like kind to what they exited from. So it was very impressive. I got to say, you are the first one I've seen pull this off, and I'm pretty hesitant to believe in a lot of these kinds of things. So it's a major feat for me to say, wow, this actually really worked, and it was really cool.
1031 is a way to shelter your income when you sell the thing. The DST is a way to avoid the 1031 and not have to suffer the time penalty.
Our career and during different tax periods, we've seen, these tax avoidance, tax minimization, offshore, all these different strategies undertaken to minimize or avoid taxes. And then I can tell you that, some of them are just not worth the trouble. And so I was skeptical. Admittedly, I was skeptical. I thought, oh yeah, here we go, another one of these, right? And then they say, no, it really is different, right? So look more closely. We looked more closely. We had, honestly, 2 years of conversations. 2 years. Now we were being due diligence at the same time that we were doing due diligence, but 2 years is a long time to be, sort of flirting with the idea of and getting to know the people and getting to really understand the transaction. Yeah, long story short, we got comfortable, although we are not tax attorneys, lawyers, or estate planning attorneys, that at least, from an investment perspective, that, it made sense to sell a highly appreciated asset, get liquid, hold that in this type of a deferred or installment sale type of instrument, and then just be in a position then to do the most important thing. I'm probably stealing your next question, which is time. They say, well, you can't make more time. You can. The Deferred Sales Trust, in a way, allows you to lengthen the investment time horizon for those assets after getting liquid, but before having to feel the tax impact. And from an investment manager's perspective, time horizon is the most important element in investing.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming in again today. We have another fantastic Friday here together where we're talking about the Deferred Sales Trust and how individuals with a highly appreciated asset can benefit from the opportunity to not recognize that transaction if they were to sell it today as a taxable event for this year. And it's a kind of a wonderful thing. Today, Brett Swarts happens to be in a conference. So he'll be jumping in and out as he's also speaking in front of a large group of people. But we have the infamous, the Pierce York, the one and the only, the man, the myth, the legend, and doing a little bit of man on the street in his car today. Pierce, how are you?
We have man in the car right now, and then we'll be man in the office after that. So not on the street today, but excited to be here with you guys and talk through some of the amazing things that we got going on here, talk through vision, talk through strategy, answer questions.
Speaking of that, Pierce, what is it that brings us here today? What is our vision?
Yeah, absolutely. So our vision for this mastermind is to bring together a variety of different people who share and explore different tax strategies, with the Deferred Sales Trust kind of being at the cornerstone of that, to explain, educate, for people to get to know, like, and trust us, for us to know, like, and trust them. It's just a place to build relationship, build camaraderie, educate, and kind of strategize, brainstorm, and just kind of put multiple brains together so that 1 + 1 can equal 3, and we can create, preserve, and grow more wealth. That's the vision behind this.
Fantastic. Absolutely. In fact, Pierce, just the other day, somebody was telling me And what we do is we liberate individuals from having to lock up their money and payments to the government and taxing authorities by utilizing this business trust. We get in front of the transaction and we allow individuals, instead of taking their sales transaction amount and chopping it up into little pieces and separating them out to all the taxing authorities, we're allowing them to pay some attorney fees and then be able to reinvest the gross proceeds after that, rather than net proceeds after taxes, which is kind of a fantastic thing. Just to paint the picture a little bit, an individual was looking at paying around 46% of the transaction in various types of tax. 46%, so almost dicing the thing in half. And utilizing the deferred sales trust, was able to actually reinvest in other assets with the gross proceeds minus only maybe 1 to 2% in total fees. And that was an easy decision. 46%, 1 to 2%.
Yeah. Jeez,
Absolutely.
that's a huge bill. It's ridiculous.
Now, Pierce, a lot of people, they just don't know what they don't know. And so let's tell them one of the things that they may not know. What is an appropriate deal size that is an easy home run? What do we look for when we're meeting with people who have something that they're selling that they otherwise will have to pay capital gains tax on, Medicare tax on, state income tax on, all those other taxes?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really looking for $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain going into the trust for the proceeds, and about that $1 million gain, which will equate to anywhere from about 230 to 400, depending upon your state and your depreciation and a few other factors, some income and all that kind of stuff. But $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain is typically a pretty good home run for pretty much anywhere in the United States.
Now, when we say $1 million proceeds, $1 million net gain, I mean, essentially we're looking for there to be enough tax paying that it's an obvious no-brainer, right?
Right.
As you mentioned, if they're like in the state of Texas and there's no state income tax, that's at least a 20% capital gains tax rate until the year 2026. Then that jumps back up to what it was before, around 28%, right? So let's just say 20% right now, plus the Medicare or the Obamacare 3.8, right? And if it's $1 million sales proceeds, $1 million gain, then we're looking at over $238,000 in taxes, which for most people, that's a no-brainer. It's like, hey, do I want to reinvest 700 and something thousand, or do I want to be able to reinvest 990 whatever thousand of my $1 million sales price?
Right.
No.
Yeah, no, to me, it makes a whole lot of sense to do it.
Now, not everybody has $1 million sales price with $1 million gain. A lot of those people are those individuals that invested in like crypto early on, those people that had a technology application that they're selling, or a business that they're selling where it was mostly, themselves with sweat equity and they don't have a high basis, or they have equipment or real estate that has been fully depreciated to where, almost everything is now gain, or it's being called back to be a gain. Some people, though, might have $1 million sales proceeds, but their basis might be 900,000. Is that a good fit, Pierce?
Do the math again for me one more time.
They might have $1 million sales price, but their basis might be 900,000. Are they going to have enough tax paying for this to make sense?
No, they would have, depending upon their state, 20 to like 30,000 in tax.
And that's just
that, because you got to factor in your commissions and closing costs and all that kind of stuff.
A lot of times
so they might walk away with not a lot of money.
So literally speaking, the attorneys, they work on a lot of really big cases. There was a case that was $120 million, a sky-rise condo apartment complex there in front of the ocean in California. And of course, if they're going to have to handle something like that versus somebody who may only have to pay $20,000 in taxes, there's going to be a level of priority there. And look at who we have, man on the street, all the way from the conference. And where, Brett?
We're in Las Vegas, Nevada, baby. It's one of the best states for tax because they have no state capital gains tax or income tax, but they still have that federal of 20%. You can't get around that one. And Obamacare 3.8. So it's still not perfect, right? But it's Nevada. It's cool. Yeah, with EXPCon 2022, been incredible leadership training. We're pitching, we're wearing this shirt every day. So it's not just about tax flow, baby, not just cash flow. So it's been good. How are we doing? How's everyone over there?
We're doing great. You're an entire 6-hour drive away from where I'm at right now. So, I'll wave across the mountains to you right now and say hello. And we have Pierce, your man on the street, Pierce's man in the car. And we're having a good discussion so far. Right now, we were talking about $1 million net, $1 million proceeds, $1 million net gain for it to be an easy home run deal. Brett, maybe just real quick, can you tell us who the Deferred Sales Trust really is not for, so that we can help clarify anybody's question about who it's not for?
Yeah, so if you want to buy a primary home or anything personal with the money, like you need the capital at closing to be able to buy a new property, then the Deferred Sales Trust is not good, because anything that's tax deferred is going to be, for personal use, is going to be taxable. So it's really for someone who wants a passive or active cash flow through the trust. But everything that's invested is in like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, or real estate, or a business venture. The government wants to stimulate us to use tax deferral strategies that actually stimulate the economy, not just for personal use. So that'd be the first thing. So it really is, what do you want to do with the money? And if you want to spend it on personal stuff, go ahead and spend it on personal stuff, pay your tax. However, there are times when you can take just a portion of it. You don't have to do it all or nothing. You might say, I want to spend it on some personal. You might sell a $5 million asset and be able to downsize a little bit and take, let's say, $1 million of that deal out, or the transaction out, and use that for your down payment. Then the other $4 million can still be in a deferral state. So realize that it's not always a one size fits all. So that'd be number one. Number two would be your deal's just not big enough, right? I mean, we talked about the size of it, right? So there's not enough tax paying, or your time horizon to be able to grow the capital is short too. You say, well, I think I'm going to need it right away. But honestly, most people who come to us, they don't need the capital right away. They're not spending it on a primary home. And even so, they're able to use the interest payments off of the trust to either qualify for like a primary home or use that for whatever their expenditures are. So those would be the main things. Timing is important as well, right? So it's not just who is it not for. It's like sometimes the timing is too far down the road, meaning the buyer has removed all contingencies, and or the deal is with a qualified intermediary that will hold you in handcuffs, and they won't allow the Deferred Sales Trust. So it's not so much who is it not for, more so who can actually use it and when can you use it. But this is part of why we have these masterminds, to kind of clarify that. Jake, what do you think?
I think that's fantastic. In fact, let's switch gears. We talked about who it's not for. Let's identify a few of those individuals that have a highly appreciated asset, who have enough tax paying that they'd rather reinvest the gross proceeds minus attorney fees rather than minus taxes. Who is this a good fit for, Brett? What are some of the examples of what people sell?
Yeah, and I'll say even what people say, it's, they really loathe paying taxes, right? And they loathe just, putting money to a government that wastes it away pretty quick, right? So they want to, but by the way, this is actually really good for the government because they're able to keep the money working and growing and creating jobs into businesses and investments. So it's actually a win-win for them and us. But it's for anyone who's selling anything that's highly appreciated. It can be cryptocurrency, it can be a business, it can be a primary home, it can be public or private stock. In fact, I'm doing a new YouTube video on a piece of art. I don't know if it's really great art, but it's an art that was here at the conference. And we're talking about that. It could be for NFTs, it could be for carried interest, captive insurance, anything that has capital gains tax, that's who it's for. As well, someone who might want to trade, cash flow rich, real estate rich and cash flow poor, right? They have this high-end primary home or even a commercial real estate asset that has no depreciation left, and it's through the roof in depreciation, and they're looking at their actual cash flow and their tax flow, and they're saying, we can optimize this if we got new depreciation schedule, and or if we just got the money working harder for you. You know, there's seasons of life and there's seasons of investing. There's times to plant, there's times to water, there's times to cultivate, and there's times to harvest. And you have to ask yourself, what season of life is this real estate deal, this cryptocurrency, this business in? And if it's time to harvest, right, and it's time to diversify, perhaps this is this perfect strategy for you, because you can defer the tax, you can diversify, and you can wait on the sidelines and buy back into real estate or other investments at optimal timing. The last one I'll leave with is anyone who's looking at estate tax challenges. And this is like an emergency. If you have a state that's greater than 24 million married or 12 million single, you're looking at a huge estate tax of about 40% should you die. It's kind of morbid to think about, but if you're able to pre-plan and sell before you die, move into what's called the DST Plus or the DST 2.0, we can eliminate that estate tax. And that's so important because there's so many other strategies that do not allow that or don't do it in such an efficient way without having to buy a bunch of life insurance or give it all the way to charity. So those would be the few of the main pain points and the main reasons you would use it, Jake.
Brett, I have a number of questions coming in from the public. Can I use this if I'm selling a racehorse?
You can, yeah, it actually can work for racehorses. People buy horses, by the way, in bulk, and then they buy real estate in bulk. They train these horses. In fact, we have a deal that it hasn't gone through, but been working with a person out of Kentucky, right? And where they have the big Kentucky Derby, and these horses they can buy for $100,000. They can be worth $3, $4, $5, $10 million or more, and that's a capital gain, right? You know, that's a horse. You cannot 1031 a horse, but you can deferred sales trust a horse. The way we do that again is we just set up an installment, a promissory note, and the structure and a trust prior to the sale, and we put that trust right in between the sale of the horse and the person who's buying it, and we're able to defer the tax.
Now, here's a question out of Georgia. If I own an equipment rental business and I have taking loans out against my business, plus I've fully depreciated all of my equipment assets, would this still make sense for me?
So the answer is it all depends. We want to look at how that depreciation's been taken, and there's Section 179 that is taken, and there's also depending on the debt over basis. So there's one Achilles heel to the Deferred Sales Trust, and the Deferred Sales Trust Plus has to do with what's called debt over basis. And based upon that, we cannot defer that. So oftentimes these things are depreciated so much the debt is above their basis, right? That's not taxable. So we'd want to look at that as a whole. However, with the DST Plus, there are ways, depending on how that depreciation has been taken, to be able to still defer capital gains tax on depreciation recapture on equipment. That's the DST Plus. DST 1.0, no. DST 2, yes. Okay, but however, we got to check with your CPA. We got to check with your tax returns. We got to go through it all in detail with the tax attorneys to make sure, because not every deal is the same. You can't use that as a blanket statement.
Now, the client's not asking this, or the individual from Georgia is not asking this, but if there is a debt over basis issue, what can we do, Brett?
Yeah, two options. Let's first about those that are not investment real estate. So it's just like a business, or it's a primary home, and which is not 1031 exchange eligible. Then the first option is or really the only option that I'm aware of, would be to pay down the debt to the basis. So we might be creative with how we do that. You might be able to transfer the debt to another asset. You might be able to borrow against a different asset to pay off the debt. And so let's just say it's a $5 million business sale, and there's no basis in it, and there's $1 million of debt. Then we would pay down that $1 million of debt to zero, pay it off, or get somehow get the debt transferred off of the business prior to the close of escrow, and that's the best way to solve it. It's really simple. So upon the sale, the $5 million goes into the trust, and you have debt somewhere else. Now, if it's investment real estate, we have what's called a Delaware statutory trust, also known as a Delaware 1031, that's eligible to replace the debt over basis. Now, what is a Delaware 1031? Well, it's just like a multifamily syndication or commercial real estate syndication. You're just buying into like a portfolio, small portfolio of a few properties or one or two properties. But what's unique about these deals is they're typically the ones that Jake works with me on and provides for clients, and other financial advisors can too. But Jake is an expert in this. Part of it, you need to be securities licensed to offer these Delaware statutory trust deals. Is that they have very high LTVs. What does that mean? Well, that means you can put a little bit of a down payment to get a lot of debt replacement. So let's take that $1 million example again, right? Well, typically it's about a 15% down to 20% down payment to replace that debt. So the way to solve debt over basis is to replace the debt. And so upon the sale, let's say it's a $5 million investment property, we move all of the $4 million, because they had a $1 million debt over basis, to this trust or to the 1031 qualified intermediary. And then step two is we take about $150,000 to $200,000 into the Delaware statutory trust, which replaces that debt of $1 million over basis. Okay, so we took and replaced the debt over basis, and now we don't have to worry because the debt's been replaced. Okay, now all of the cash flow, we call it a zero coupon, is now going to go to paying off of that debt. So it's kind of like, use that versus paying an ordinary income tax, which is what debt over basis is. So we have a unique way to do that. Jake and I have executed this. There's a few moving parts, but then after that, day 45, day 46, we move the remaining 4 million minus, let's say the 200,000, about 3.8 million into the deferred sales trust. So you get the best of both worlds, and you have a chance to diversify and be liquid and be wherever you want to be. Does that make sense, Jake?
It does. Now, I have another question about some people who do syndications. And I'm going to answer it first, and then I'll have you fill in the gaps if you don't mind.
Sure.
So this question is, hey, I do real estate syndications, and I, quote, take advantage of cost segregation, accelerated depreciation, and I have a lot of offsets against my income. Would this make sense if I don't necessarily need it because of all my other deductions?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And let me answer first.
Sure.
I want to touch on this real quick. I'm going to say yes, because you are possibly taking sooner than you need to a lot of your deductions that are available to you. Meaning, in the long-term scheme of things, if you're doing syndications and you're going to hold the properties for a longer period of time, you're going to have more of the income against no more deduction problem later on if you take it all sooner than you need to. Whereas with this, you can actually plan to take some of that later on and defer everything now so that a lot of those other tax mitigating strategies are not necessary to be fully exhausted day one. So I would say from an optimization standpoint, this from a planning perspective can help you out greatly, maximize your lifetime tax strategy benefits rather than exhausting them all day one. Brett, what would you add to that?
Yeah, let me just kind of give you a real life deal. He's actually a client of mine. I've sold some multifamily property for here in Sacramento. His first name is Harry, and he has a $10 million asset. Now, he's not necessarily into syndication right now, but he might consider going into syndications. But his biggest thing, he has a zero basis, right? A zero basis. So if he sells for, and in fact, the property's probably worth 13 million now. That was a few years ago at 10. California's going to give it like a 40% tax at least, if not 45 with an appreciation recapture. So that's like maybe $5.5 million of tax. So the first thing is to clarify is, what is the liability? What are we trying to solve for, right? Number two would be, well, you say, Brett, we're buying multifamily syndication deals. We're buying more deals. Can we do some cost seg to offset some of that $5.5 million? And the answer might be yes, but it might take a lot to do that amount. So we've had deals where the liability is not that huge, and these folks are going into their other deals. And in that scenario, we do say, hey, if you have some cost seg that you can get on this next one, great, then offset it. If you don't, then great, we'll work with you, right? Or maybe it's a combination of both. But we call this strategy tax flow, right? So it's tax flow, not just cash flow. The tax flow situation is how much depreciation do you have, or how much depreciation might you have, versus what's your cash flow and what's your capital gains tax, and how do we get these two to really mesh together in a nice harmonious way, and that's through planning and through looking at different strategies. Now, to Jake's point, we can get a new depreciation schedule when we do the deferred sales trust. So even if you had some actual cost seg to offset gains tax, you still might want to go through the deferred sales trust in order to then partner with the trust, especially if you're an active multi-indicator, to get a new depreciation schedule, right? Because in multifamily, you get 27 and a half years for depreciation schedule. And if you do a 1031, the old depreciation schedule travels, whereas the deferred sales trust, you can get a new basis and you get up to about 80% of the depreciation, depending on how we structure the deals. And so these are all the little nuances that we look at like in a Rubik's Cube that we want to work with you and your team and Jake and I, the tax attorney, to really break it down. Jake, how does that sound?
I think that's perfect, Brett. That helps out a lot of people, not only the individual asking the question, but I think other people here are on the call who also participate in syndications. I think that's very good information. And of course, it's easier to be laser focused when we have an actual deal in front of us. So thank you for sharing the information with the deal with Harry, because I think that helps all of us. Moving on to the next question. This is an easy one. I mean, the client's asking, hey, what if I really don't have any basis? You know, is this more or less advantageous, or, you know, does it have to be $1 million?
So it depends on what state you're in. We have done deals less than $1 million, but what we have found is if we go too low in certain states, that the liability or the pain, if you will, doesn't necessitate or doesn't really give us value for you, right? We want to make sure we're providing a ton of value by deferring a lot of tax. Have we done deals in California, New York, some of these higher tax states? Yes. That are lower than $1 million? Yes. However, we typically are combining that with two deals. So someone might say, I've got a $700,000 deal. I've got zero basis. You know, I have a substantial amount of tax. I'm in California. And then I've also got another $500,000 deal. So combined, we can get it above $1 million. We found that to be the way to scale the DST with the fees and the team that's involved to be most advantageous. So that's the short answer, Jake. Any thoughts on that?
No, I think that's helpful. It really does depend on their circumstance and if the tax pain is significant enough, right?
Yep, exactly.
Obviously, if in a state with a higher income tax, we're adding that to the federal tax, comparing that to a state that doesn't have an income tax, then there's some wiggle room and some variables there. Right now, I think it's time. We're at the halfway point. We can ask the panel, we can ask the people here in the group, we can ask people on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Well, I don't know if we're going to get any comments from Twitter, but we can ask the group if you have any questions. If you have a deal that you'd like to discuss, if you liked or didn't like anything that we said, let's talk about it. Let's clear the water, so to speak. I know that we have Lana calling in from the car, and we have Jake Carpenter. We have a few invites here with us today. We have Eddie from London that also has some U.S. businesses. Any questions? Any questions from the group? Of course, we've got Pierce, who's no longer man in the car, but man in the office.
Man in the office.
That's right. I can't tell if Lana, you are on mute still. If you'll unmute yourself, we'll gladly take your question.
Thanks, you guys, for doing this. It's my first time sitting in, and I have an appointment with Brett next week. But in short, I am trying to figure out how a DST would work for us to solve the problem. About a $4 million family-owned limited partnership, 50-50 ownership between my husband, who's GP, and his brother, pretty much. Unfortunately, all the ownership is in heritage trusts, which have horrible tax rates. It seemed like a good idea in 1992, I'm sure, when my mother-in-law did the estate planning. But my husband is looking to possibly continue operating, but he's open to a cash out if we can mitigate the capital gains tax bite. His brother wants to completely cash out. So I'm trying to get my head around how this could work for us to meet both of those demands, a cash out for half of it and either a buyout on my husband's part for his brother, or a cash out with a DST for his half of it. So I'm just interested. The other question I had was, you know, at $4 million now, if he holds on to it, and with the estate tax ceilings dropping in half in 2 years, if we hold on, by the time we retire in 10 years, we should look at a DST 2.0, because we may hit those ceilings if those rates continue to go downward, which I kind of expect them to do. as the government wants in on this huge transfer of wealth that's happening demographically. So just your opinions on that and any ideas you might have that could help us make the best decision.
Absolutely. Jake, you want me to start or do you want to start?
Go ahead, Brett.
All right. So let's talk about the last one here for just the latter one. I think
Okay.
I wanted to be thinking about your overall estate value and your age and also what you own beyond this $4 million deal. Sounds like it's a 50-50 ownership or 2 million, right? And what your potential net worth could be, because that's what the government does. They say, what's the total net worth at the time of your death and what exclusion is available, whether it be 12 million right now single, 24 million married, and if it's cut in half, and that's 6 million, single, 12 million married, potentially even lower too. So I think that's really wise to be thinking about that. And so that's certainly some planning we can do. And sometimes that means we're going to do a combination between 1 and 2 trusts, DST 1.0 for the more flexible part of the income stream to be able to work during your lifetime, and then the 2.0, which is more for your heirs or estate planning purposes to eliminate tax. And so those are certainly things we can look at on a one-by-one basis. I think that's wise. Now, to answer your first part of the question, which is partnerships, right? What's beautiful about the deferred sales trust is the whole entity doesn't have to move. So, in a 1031 exchange is typically the whole entity must move. So if you have one partner who wants to sell and do a 1031 and one who wants to sell and cash out, it can become very complicated and it can become kind of just a complete roadblock, right? And so in the deferred sales trust, what's beautiful, it's not a 1031. So each partner can go their separate way. One partner can pay their tax, not do a deferred sales trust. The other partner can do a deferred sales trust. And we call that a seamless partnership separation. Now, you mentioned something that's sounds a little bit unique to me. I don't know if I've even heard of this thing that you guys used before. So I will want the tax attorney to do kind of an MRI or an x-ray on that.
Yeah.
My instinct tells me there's no reason we can't exit that position into the trust, but it's not something I've actually done before. I'm sure they have over those years. So we'll certainly run that by. But my instinct tells me you and your husband can go your separate way, defer your tax to the deferred sales trust. The partner can either have his own deferred sales trust or just pay his tax. And the smoke clears, buyer takes title, they're gone, and you guys are in a nice position. So far, Lana, did I answer the questions or anything on that I can clarify for you?
I think so. I think I agree with you. I think it's going to take some experts looking at this. The only question that left me with was, if I structured it into a DST, can I instruct the trustee as far as the type of investments to make? Are accredited investor type investments allowable inside that trust that the DST is?
It's such an important question. Like, once the deferred sales trust closes, like, what kind of controls, what kind of input, what kind of investments can the investments go into, and how does that all work? So the answer is actually it's a team effort. It does take dual approval from me as the trustee and you and your husband as the creditors. But nothing ever moves without your approval or your signature, and nothing also moves without my approval or my signature. The reason why you have to have what's called indirect control, which what this is because if you had complete unilateral control, it'd be taxable. And
Right.
So it's between you and us working together. Now, here's the cool thing. I'm a friendly trustee. I'm also happen to be an expert in commercial real estate, and I love real estate. But we also have another team member, which is Jake Miller, as a financial advisor, and he's an expert really in kind of really all things. He does real estate too, but business ventures, M&As, of course, securities. He's a CFP. So our goal is to bring the dream team to help you and your husband execute this deferred sales trust in the best possible way. But here's really the reality. You are like the CEO and I'm like the COO, right? This is a complex business trust that takes multiple parties to work. Jake is like the CFO, and we're here to serve you and your family. And so what does that mean? Well, that might mean, Brett, we want to go into multifamily syndications with some partners of ours or by ourselves. We might want to go into our own deals, develop real estate by ourselves. Can we do that? Yes. Can we also go into the stock market? Absolutely, right? But it does take working on the team together to execute that. Does that answer the questions for you, Alana?
I believe so. I just want to make sure there weren't any SEC rules about doing accredited investing inside of that trust. It's not. It's a possibility.
I was going to say it actually makes things a little easier because your trustee actually is a trustee of several other trusts, and the accredited investor rules and regulations are based off of his status, and he very easily meets all of those requirements and classifications. So that for you, if anything, the investment options for alternative investments that require accredited investor status just got a lot bigger. You have
Right.
more options to the table now.
Okay.
The other item I was going to mention that we touched on, but we went over very quickly, would be any amount that would be left in your estate should we be using the deferred sales trust. When we put an asset into the trust prior to the sale, there's a corresponding promissory note. That's when Brett's talking about you being the creditor, right?
Mhm.
That is the amount that gets frozen, and anything that goes into the trust that then grows, right? Should we be using the version 2.0? What's left in your estate, that amount is what stays there and doesn't actually continue to grow. So we're helping limit the future possibility of you superseding that exclusion amount from the IRS. Does that make sense?
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
So-
Can I get one more question in?
Of course, Lana, good.
So I know that the tax is payable as you receive the money, and but at what rate? So is it a transaction that's deferred at whatever the rates are now in the current political climate, or is it as you do it, year by year? Let's say you renew 2 10-year terms for 20 years. So you're going to be subject to that risk of knowing how those tax structures are going to move, if I understand correctly.
It's the latter. You're absolutely correct. It is the latter. Here's the reality, Lana. Most of our clients like to keep the golden goose laying the golden egg, right? Which means they're typically just live off the interest payments. And that's for DST 1.0. DST 2.0, it is a mixture between cap gains tax and interest on your life expectancy. It's part of why it's different. It gets it outside the taxable estate, which is kind of another discussion. However, it also could go the other way. I mean, not that we don't think it ever will, but let's say they had a tax holiday or they had a lower cap gains tax in a certain year in the future.
Yeah.
It might be, hey, everyone get out in the same year, and Jake and I are starting from scratch.
Probable. Would be a nice one.
It's not likely, right? So so the answer is you'd pay a higher capital gains tax rate. But let me also throw this in here. What state do you live in now?
Texas.
Texas. Okay, you're in a good state, right? You're one of the best. I say good. I mean, you're in a very tax-friendly state. It's also a great state. Texas, Florida, the Tennessees, Alabamas are pretty good. And Nevada's, of course, Wyoming. These are the states that are typically pretty tax-friendly. The interest payments, you're going to pay ordinary income tax on, right? So since you're in Texas, that's a good thing, right? Because you're in a lower one there. And then the cap gains tax would be based upon if you're selling the asset in Texas, it'll follow that as well. Even if you move to Puerto Rico, you're still going to pay cap gains tax in Texas based upon where you're at. But in that scenario, you had zero anyways. It'd just be the federal. So does that answer the question so far, Lana?
Yeah, that's correct. I think we probably need to look into dissolving these trusts as part of the structure, because at a 37% ordinary income, even interest payments only don't make sense when my adjusted GI puts me at a lower marginal tax rate on a 1040. So we may need to look at that, having those judicially dissolved.
I can tell we're going to have fun. We're going to be geeking out about this tax thing, Lana. You're going to fit right everybody here. So.
One of the things that you'll appreciate, Lana, with this is that essentially by putting it into the trust, the benefit that I think is greatest above everything, because you're right, we are just taking whatever tax classification it was going in. That's how it's going to come out eventually when it does come out. But what we are doing is we're putting the power of timing in your hands. Meaning, regardless of the tax rates going up or down or whatever they do, you now have the power of choice. When it's the right time to sell, you don't always have the right, you don't fully have the power of choice because it's the right time to sell. It may not be the right time to pay taxes, but it's the right time to sell, right? Now with the deferred sales trust, you have the power of when to recognize it as income. So even if the tax rates go up, but you have other tax mitigating strategies that you can couple in with the deferred sales trust, you can take advantage. And sometimes it doesn't even matter if the tax rates go up. You're still going to pay less in taxes because we're going to work with you as the COO, as the CFO, and you as the lenders creditors, as the CEO. We're going to help combine everything else that we know and all the professionals that we know with you and what you want to do and what your goals and objectives are.
And by the way, that's called tax flow, right? That's the whole point of this. And it's in a Rubik's cube, and it's going to be constantly moving slightly for you and your husband and your family and your situation. And your goal, Lana, and our goal, and as we're all in this together. you bring your cube that's all, it's some of it's all lined up, perfect harmony, and other of it's kind of just is not organized. And we're going to not necessarily disorganized, just needs to be shifted a little bit, shift a little bit. And ideally it's going to be congruent on all sides. And that's for your family, that's for your lifestyle, that's for your cash flow, that's for your tax flow, that's for your estate tax challenges, that's for location freedom, financial freedom, that's for time and energy freedom, right? These things are so amazing with the Deferred Sales Trust, but what you'll quickly learn is it's not just the strategy, it's the team of experts to help you
Right.
the business plan of the Deferred Sales Trust. This is part of why it's not so widely known or used, because there's not a lot of people that are dedicated to or have the training or have the 10,000 hours with a tax attorney to know how to move that cube, right? You ever seen that a Rubik's Cube? It's like a spelling bee championship. These guys move in like 6 seconds. They're like so brilliant. Like Jake and I, we can move some of it, right? And you're going to move some of it too. You can tell you're already smart with this tax stuff. Then the tax attorneys really dial it in. And it's that teamwork, right? It's like the teamwork makes the dream work, right? We've got to work together. We've got to execute. But the beauty of the Deferred Sales Trust, it's already been proven. Thousands of closes, billions under management, 26-year track record. And there's that lifetime audit defense that if any time, state or federal, there's an audit, they will defend no additional charge. So we're in it together. And that's part of the fun part, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Let's thank the government for having such high taxes so that we can help one another, build wealth. Does that make sense?
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to talking in more detail on Monday.
Absolutely. So I've got to jump right now. I'm going to leave it off to Jake. If people want to get in touch with me, they can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Please rate, review, subscribe, YouTube channel, podcast, LinkedIn, searching by capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Look for the new book that's coming out. We do have D. Miller in the book, who you just heard from. He's the financial advisor extraordinaire. And also someone named Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. He's in the book, a couple other people. But if you could share this with somebody who can inspire today and or help with their tax flow situation, we would so appreciate that. And with that being said, I'm going to pass it off to Jake and to Pierce and Lana. And everyone else have a great rest of your weekend. Okay.
Thank you, Brett.
Thanks.
Enjoy the conference. All right, here we are again. Lana, did you have any other questions that you might want to ask?
No, I'm good. I need to get out of line so other people can get in.
No,
Thank you.
you're just fine. Thank you so much for your questions today. All right. Anybody else from the group today? We've got a couple more questions, but as Brett was talking, we answered some of them from Facebook group. Here in the Zoom on the panel, Pierce, any golden nuggets that you want to pull from that conversation we just had?
I want to learn more about this heritage trust that Lana was talking about.
There's more types of trust than there are flavors of ice cream, right?
Kind of a monster.
Can you give us any high-level details there, Lana?
Well, it appears to be, it was an estate planning tool back when the estate tax had a much lower ceiling. So it was created in '92 as a plan by my mother-in-law's attorneys. She made gifts during the year for about 5 or 6 years. She transferred the bulk of her estate over to those shares, by share value each year by making those distributions. And so that when she passed, there was none of it subject to estate tax. Of course, by that time, it was a moot point because the level was 11 and 22 million. So when she created it, it was worth maybe 6 in '92, and it was mismanaged pretty badly after my husband's father died. So it was actually worth less when she died than what it was when she created the entire construct in '92. And as you've probably heard people say, you're better off having no lawyer than having a bad lawyer. And in this case, they never revisited her estate plan since 1992. So it aged out of applicability, and it's now probably costing more than it ever saved her, So it just seems like a dying breed. I don't even think people use them anymore, but it seemed to have been in vogue back in the '90s.
Now, there's a heritage trust, there's a dynasty trust, there's a generation skipping trust, there's a spendthrift trust. There's a lot of different kinds of trusts. And
it seems to have most of all of those qualities. It has a spendthrift, it has a generation skipping quality to it as well. But they really went unused. They're qualities that we paid for but never triggered. There wasn't any taxable events that were triggered. So
well, let's share that again with our tax attorneys and just
sure.
Review everything and what the possibilities are. And of course, we'll go first to the Deferred Sales Trust tax attorneys who are brilliant beyond anything I've ever seen, right? But love to get a copy of the Heritage Trust.
Okay.
That way.
I'd be happy to upload if you have somewhere you want me to send it or an email.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, if you want to give me your email address right now, I'll shoot you an email.
Okay. It's LONNA, S as in Sam,
ONNA, S as in Sam.
PHONE, Lana's phone @gmail.com.
Okay. I'll just say Heritage Trust.
Got it. I'll just reply back because they're all 8 of them are exactly the same. So I'll send you a trust agreement.
All right, getting that sent out.
Awesome.
And again, you know, the names of these trusts are sometimes deceiving. Sometimes there's a lot of names and yet the inside is the same. And so it might be something that we've dealt with before, and it might be a little different. It all depends on the inside of the trust.
Right. Okay. Great. Well, I trust you guys. I'm sure you'll figure it out.
Very good. Excited to take on the challenge, right? Okay. Well, Lana, thanks again for sharing. And again, part of the reason we're here is we very openly as professionals, rather than what most professionals do by keeping everything very close to the chest and like, this is the secret sauce. This is, you know, we don't share with anybody. We're the opposite. We like to get information out there. We like people to bring to us what might be new or different or unique. And we like to share with the community so that amongst everyone, we all can learn and be better for it.
Right. Sounds good.
All right. We are coming close to the end of our call today. Any comments from London with Eddie? Any comments from Pierce?
Good stuff. This is why we do this.
Pierce, if people want to reach out to you and learn more about Kingdom Luxury Realty, how do they reach you?
Yeah, you guys can reach me at kingdomluxuryrealty.com. You can also check out the YouTube channel that we're starting called Living in Newport Beach, and our Instagram, which we're starting. I got my wife she's on the reel train now. So
nice.
Posting videos, doing all that fancy stuff.
Love it.
Yep.
Very good. As well, if people would like to reach out to me, just like Brett, I have a website and I have a booking link on my website. My website is strategictaxsolutions.com. And again, if people want to call, which is just fine as well, we have an 800 number, 1-800-773-1848. I want to thank everyone for coming out today. I hope that we have learned what can be done with highly appreciated assets in regards to the Deferred Sales Trust, when it makes sense, when it doesn't. And of course, our willingness to help people find a solution to their otherwise tax paid. And so please join us next time, every Friday. This is where we are. Happy to meet you, your friends, your neighbors, your business associates, anybody that you know that is having a highly appreciated asset sale, and they're wanting to consider what else they can do rather than just pay the taxes now. So please give us a call, reach out, watch our videos on YouTube, and tune in next week. Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.